Today is Bob Dylan's birthday, one of the most influential musicians of all time. A modern-day troubadour, his lyrics and songs have inspired generations. Robert Allen Zimmerman remains a leading voice in our national conversation and around the world through his music. The man who has sold over 125 million albums, yet has never had a #1 single, who plugged in at Newport in 1965 and shocked the world, who once famously penned the lyric, "I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now," turns 80 years old today. Joining us now to celebrate Bob Dylan's life and legacy, lead writer for Esquire.com's politics blog, Charles Pierce, and preeminent Dylan expert professor at Harvard University, Richard Thomas. He teaches a wildly popular seminar at Harvard, affectionately dubbed Dylan 101, on the legendary musician, and is the author of the book, Why Bob Dylan Matters.
So, Charlie, we went through the metrics, over 100 million records sold, all the awards, you can count them. I think Dylan, more than anybody in the rock pantheon, anybody in popular music, there's really no metric that sufficiently measures his influence on music and on not just American culture, but the culture of this world. Could you help our viewers understand that a little better?
Well, I think, on his latest album, which came out of the blue, last summer, right when we needed it, I would point out, he's got a song called "I Contain Multitudes," which is a line he copped from Walt Whitman. And those of us who followed his entire career think, yeah, okay, we all knew that. I mean, the guy's had about 7 careers in one.
Yeah.
And I think about Todd Haynes' terrific movie, I'm Not There, where they had all these people playing Bob at different stages of his career. And that's really the only way to really do a biography of the guy, because he's been so many people. It's an extraordinary American life. Let's put it that way. A life of American reinvention.
Yeah, time and time again. And Richard, of course, most famously, when he went electric at the Newport Folk Festival in '65, was booed on stage. Just as people started to figure him out, he in '79 to Slow Train Coming. He got booed in the opening shows there when he started doing Christian music. Talk about Bob Dylan containing multitudes. And I must say, along with Charlie, the fact that he continues to put out great music. I was shocked by what came out last summer, just when we needed it the most.
Exactly, yeah. And that album is like no other album of Dylan's. There's something new happening here. So at age 79, an album that musically, lyrically, in all sorts of ways is just amazing. I've made up my mind to give myself to you is a song of pure love and commitment, and just the lines that he picks. And no one ever told me. It's just something I knew. I've made up my mind, give myself to you. And just with the voice of Dylan, the old but now clear voice. Dylan's voice has, of course, like the personas that Todd Haynes picks up on, Dylan has manipulated those voices. And it's just marvelous to have this new album, which also has lots of my stuff on it, lots of Greeks and Romans, that Dylan's put himself into that tradition, becoming Odysseus in the album Tempest from 2012, and it's just a marvel and a delight to continue to go through life with Bob Dylan.
So Charlie, for those who may be younger, who never really dove into Dylan or followed Dylan, can you explain how important his albums were in '65 and '66, not just to rock music, but to popular music? Highway 61 Revisited and Blonde on Blonde?
Well, I mean, he did bring it all back home. Highway 61 Revisited and Blonde on Blonde in an incredible burst of productivity. fueled by God alone knows what, of course. But and that, I always kid people and call that the Great Trilogy. But that was real. That was the first mold that he broke. That was the first time he changed popular music so radically. Bruce Springsteen said, "What Elvis did for your body, Bob Dylan did for your mind." He kicked in the door with those 3 records in terms of what you can do as a songwriter. And I think the best witness to that is that he affected both John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and drove the Beatles to develop their own voices. It's impossible to overstate the influence of that he had on the Beatles, just as it's impossible to overstate the influence the Beatles had on all of popular music. And then he has the automobile accident or the motorcycle accident. He goes away, then he comes back with Nashville Skyline with completely different singing voice and a real gentler side. And then he tends to go away. And in 1974, he unleashes Blood on the Tracks on the world, which I still think is his greatest album and maybe the best album I've ever heard. But it's, if you listen to the songs on that album, with the exception of Lily Rosemary, the Jack of Hearts, and maybe Buckets of Rain, it's an incredibly painful record. He said of Tangled Up in Blue, it took me 6 months to write that song and 3 years to live it.
Yeah, Blood on the Tracks, obviously one of his greatest, one of the greatest of the era. Tell me, Richard, do you have a favorite Dylan album? Is there any way for you to boil it down to that, or one Dylan album that mattered more to music for you?
Yeah, I was 24 when that album that Charlie mentions came out, and it's, to me, the seminal album. I brought Blonde on Blonde was the only album, along with songs of Leonard Cohen, I brought with me from New Zealand in '74. Leonard Cohen, by the way, started singing his poems after he heard Bob Dylan singing. So before that, Cohen wrote, but he didn't sing his poems, and that makes a difference. But Blood on the Tracks, I mean, a song like Simple Twist of Fate, Shelter from the Storm, and his ability to paint images. He'd started painting at that point, of course, but to paint these images of scenes with the changes of pronouns, he, she, I, which sort of brings us into the songs, and we can be the he, we can be the I, we can be the she, and just the lyrical poetry of a situation, love that isn't working out. We all feel it, but we can't put it into words in the way that Dylan did for us. And so once we have that possession, we can apply it to our own lives. And that's what Dylan is about. He's singing our songs for us.
Bob Dylan turns 80 years old today. Charles Pierce and Richard Thomas, thank you both very much for joining us this morning.